If anyone has started the meeting, we cannot hear you.
Get closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So sorry, I'll just start over. So some of the rumors that we've heard going through on Facebook or social media is that that we may be trying to limit short-term rentals based on the number of days, and just kind of put that to bed that we have not discussed that, nor is that a direction that the county was looking to go to limit, or at least at this point has not been a discussion. And yeah, so anybody that has any concerns about that, there is an act that was passed in September of 2017, was Wisconsin's Right to Rent Act, and basically laws were created to basically make sure that local governments could not take away the right for homeowners to rent their property. So a bill was created, and there is limitations in there that if local governments wanted to limit that, they could do so, not doing anything less than 180 days. But again, we are not looking to implement that at any time. So if anybody has any questions on that, but again, it is Wisconsin's Right to Rent Act, number 59, which was passed in September 2017.
All right, the next section is public comments. So at this time, members of the public will be given the opportunity to address the committee. Please adhere to the following when addressing the committee. Comments may be limited to 3 minutes. Due to the size of the group, we are going to try to stick with 3 minutes. Hopefully it won't go too long, but we'll try to stick with 3 minutes. Comments should be directed to the committee as a whole and not directed at individual committee members. The committee cannot respond to your comments during this time. And we've got sign-in sheets up here, so I'll go ahead and start, or you want to? Yes, Jay, go ahead. He's got some to read.
So we have some that were distributed via email that I'd like to read into record. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to present comments. To recap a couple of things I've been thinking about on the subject of rentals and the desire for better, clearer management of them, and the potential resistance to other ordinance developments or other stipulations by county board members, zoning, or by rental property owners. Here are a few of these thoughts. Regarding folks claiming that they should have the right to run a business unencumbered by regulations, this is unique in that businesses are not existing generally in commercial or industrial settings or on Main Street. They're moving into existing neighborhoods and create new disruptions. That alone is worthy of serious examination about mitigating rentals and the location. For folks who claim the need for a long-running history of rentals here and all over, this is true, but prior to the open-ended style of rental in hotels, motels, and resort, there's always been 24/7 managers or owners on duty, preventing many issues and clarifying managing issues before problems develop. For folks who claim there are no issues or seldom are, note that when planning policy, we do not wait until full-blown problems develop, but plan ahead to mitigate and solve potential issues of the growth of the industry and resulting documented issues. I've heard descriptions about fire department response and not being able to get a hold of owners or managers, having to manage situations for many hours because of the lack of owner response. Our sheriff's department and fire EMS departments are already strained enough without communities developing even more of them to be one of those to solve STR, short-term rental issues as they arise. I've heard firsthand report from folks who have tried to explain local regs to renters, like hours of operation for certain crafts on the lake, or proximity to shore, or ATV, UTV access paths, and that can't be driven around in certain areas, only to be told I'm paying X amount of dollars for my vacation up here and I'm going to do as I please. Is there a mandate or requirements that renters post or make aware on websites or write into a rental agreement that clients must adhere to laws on water and roads? Also, fireworks, noise, burning, parking on roads, invasive species concerns, other mandates, etc. The model of owners meeting with our contracting all neighbors with a certain distance to ask concerns or how they can be the best community members when they rent should be strongly considered, as opposed to making no effort to contact existing residents and without warning beginning to rent. We discussed this loosely and how this could go such a long way in heading off problems where new rental businesses move into existing neighborhoods. A 30-minute response time instead of an hour. This seems completely reasonable. Who is supposed to manage the community problem when the owner is in Eau Claire, Green Bay, or Ashland, or out of the state? Not like it's been at other resorts where managers are on duty. What contingencies are in place if there is no landline or cell service is spotty? How will out-of-area owners of these businesses assure neighbors, the town, county, local law enforcement of their prompt response when phone service may be iffy? These are just a few of my thoughts. Thank you for letting me present my comments. Ralph Hansen, Town Chair of Round Lake. Oh, okay. Ralph Hansen as citizen. Tourist Rooming House Committee. 9357 Secluded Trail on the north side of Spring Lake was purchased in January of 2022. The owner has never lived in that house and has been renting it at VRBO of $319 a night and $328 on Airbnb. On both sites, it indicates that it sleeps 11, has 3 baths and 4 bedrooms. There have been 4 to 6 cars there almost every week all summer long. This essentially turns a residential zoned house into a commercial property. Either a property must be zoned to do this or should be a maximum number of rental nights allowed. I would suggest limiting rental nights to 12 a year. When I contacted the town of Bass Lake Treasurer last spring, they were unaware that the property was being rented or any room tax being paid. How do you ensure that this private property is paying the appropriate taxes on their business as it is no longer a residential home? Zoning doesn't allow other businesses to set up shop like this. While I encourage business and tourism in the area, turning these quiet residential neighborhoods into commercial resort properties need to be stopped. Terry Hogan. Towns, this is addressed to me. Dear Jay, towns of Sawyer County are concerned about the implications of the lack of regulation over short-term rental properties. We would welcome and hope to see from zoning ideas and other visions to minimize conflict between property owners in existing neighborhoods and dwellings now being used for short-term rentals. While there may be a certain regulatory action outside of zoning that can legally write into ordinance form, anything that can be done to preempt and minimize conflicts would be deeply appreciated by many communities in Sawyer County. If rental properties are allowed to continue to grow in scope uncontrolled, in some cases with absentee owners or managers unable or unwilling to take corrective actions to mitigate conflicts, we fear that the proliferation could seriously escalate conflicts in towns where enforcement powers are essentially non-existent or at best fall only on the sheriff's department. However, if addressed on the front of the issue, they could be minimized instead of continuing to grow countywide. Please consider helping Sawyer County municipalities preempt these issues through zoning actions and by budgeting for positions to help enforce current and future ordinances or policies. Facilitating more rental property growth without addressing existing and future issues will likely create increased conflict in Sawyer County neighborhood. Thank you for your consideration. This is signed for the Town of Round Lake Board of Supervisors, Town of Hunter Board of Supervisors, Town of Spider Lake Board of Supervisors, Lac-Courte Lake Association, Whitefish Lake Property Owners Association, Round Lake Property Owners Association, Chippewa Flowage Area Property Owners Association, Moose Lake Improvement Action, and the Tiger Cat Association, or Tiger Cat Lake Association. Those are the ones that I had previously received and are now incorporated into the record.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, so our first comment is Clancy Green. No comment? Okay. Linda Zilmer.
Linda Zilmer, resident of the Village of Birchwood, Edgewater property owner, and have attended zoning and committee meetings since 2005. So I've seen this issue kick down the can, or the county kick the can down the road for many years. From when there was a point there were maybe less than 100 of the short-term rental tourist rooming houses to now, over 500, approaching 600. I had sent an email to Jay and asked that it be shared with the committee as a request for a future meeting to look at the county ordinances, whether it's zoning and health and human services and law enforcement, that the tools that the county has now to address the concerns that are being brought forward, as well as the state statutes which are maybe a little bit different or cover different areas in the administrative rules for these things, as well as something that was mentioned in a previous meeting about addressing the definitions, because a tourist rooming house may be different than a short-term rental, and which laws apply. And maybe an exercise would be to have an example of a person who owns a property like this come forward and explain, these are all the regulations and this is the process we went through, so everybody understands. Because I appreciate the attention on the occupancy, helping solve some of the problems, but I think a full understanding of the process will help with you making recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Robinson.
Morning. My name is Mark Robinson. I'm an attorney. I'm here representing Managed Cabins, which is a business that does rentals in the Surrey County area. We also do rentals throughout the state of Wisconsin. The reason I'm here today is to talk about the background of what we do at Managed Cabins. So I used to live here. I was a practicing attorney in this town. We bought a place on the Chippewa Flowage, and Cheryl Treeland actually helped us set it up as a rental about 8 years ago. VRBO kind of went through the roof, and now there's a lot of people that have larger houses that we manage, similar to what Mr. Dale manages is on his smaller houses. These are houses that have 4 or 5, 6 bedrooms. We abide by all the county regulations. We work regularly with Mr. McKay. We pay town taxes. We pay state taxes. We pay county taxes. We're a business. We have 15 people that work for us. We manage almost 40 houses in and around the Surrey County area. Average rentals are about 25 weeks a year. We're going to pay sales tax on over $2 million of income this year, of which Surrey County reaps benefits off that. According to the State Tourism Office, if you rent a place, you're going to spend about $1,000 to $2,000 a week on ancillary services, whether it be grocery stores, convenience stores, gas, boat rentals. They're going to go to Treelands for ice cream. They're going to go to Treelands for bait. They're going to go to Anglers for burgers. It's probably another $2 million worth of ancillary revenue that Surrey County makes off of our rentals. Most of those rentals are not 2-bedroom houses. They're not the resorts from the 60s and 70s when I was a kid. They're the 4 and 5-bedroom houses where 3 generations of people come and stay. They're the resorts, or the houses, where 2 or 3 families come and stay. They want to spend time under one roof. They want to spend time with each other. They want to have the kids be in the basement playing ping pong, and the adults are upstairs playing cards. They want to have a fire pit where they can have 10 people sitting around or 12 people sitting around a fire pit. That's not something that's offered by resorts in Surrey County. That's not offered by the hotels in Surrey County. As I said, we manage places throughout the state. And as I was talking to Mr. Wellauer this morning, the counties in the state of Wisconsin don't all enforce the administrative code consistently. We can rent a place in Green Lake where they don't care. They get a water test, they sign off on the license, they're good. Oneida County is very strict. They have somebody watching their website. They shut you down if you're advertising for more than what your septic system allows. Surrey County is kind of in the middle. But what you have to remember is that these people come to Surrey County to spend money here. And if you start shutting down temporary rooming houses and you start regulating to where if I have a 6-bedroom house and I have a 3-bedroom septic system, you're going to say you can only have 6 people living there or 9 people living there, depending on how you interpret the code. These people are going to go somewhere else. They're not going to go down the road and stay at a resort in Surrey County. They're not going to go down the road and stay at a hotel. They're going to go to Bayfield County. They're going to go to Ashland County. They're going to go to Vilas County. And so I think that the committee needs to remember that there's an economic benefit to Surrey County, similar to what Mr. Bodenschatz is doing with his campground that he's opening up. You're bringing money to Surrey County. People want to spend money here. And in our business, we don't have the sheriff come to our places. We abide by
Thank
the
you.
laws and
Thank you.
restrictions. Thank you.
Next is Jim Tiffany.
Jim Tiffany, 10920 in Geist Road, Hayward. I'm partners with John and Mark. I do have a little bit of different view. There's been some things out there that people say the lakes are too busy. There's too many cars parked on the road in the summertime. Absolutely. It's been that way since I was a little kid. When I got my driver's license, my dad told me, you will not get the car if you drive up Main Street in the summertime. That's been something we all have to live with, okay? I get the code as it has to be interpreted somehow, but a lot of the things running around, people are saying, well, you know, it's too busy, it's this, that. The problem is that's on all vacation rentals. And I don't know how many of you have actually lived on a lake. I hear a lot of people say, oh, Round Lake's terribly busy. I was out there last night pulling my daughter water skiing, only boat there. That's generally how it is. But people here on the weekend, it's very busy. So I wish you'd take a bigger view of this and not get caught up in the innuendo. I know there's laws in place, certain ways they should be enforced, but look at that. I know a lot of people have VRBOs and they live somewhere else. It's a problem. If you have your rooming house permit, I know when they started something like 5 years ago, they were trying to have a local address, a local contact. I know a lot of those don't have that anymore. I think that would solve a lot of problems. I know a lot of people think there's a lot of law enforcement calls on problems. And I wish someone would document that and say, yep, we had 20 to this business. I thought in the original permit they talked about 5 years ago that if you had 2 law enforcement calls, they could jerk your permit. Do that. That'll take care of a lot of it. Thanks.
Next is Amy Stalter.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Stalter, and we currently own, my husband and I, John Stalter, own 3 short-term rentals in Sawyer County. And specifically for the record, and it should be noted in the minutes, I want the committee to be aware that I did ask to present for this agenda, but I was denied. And so I just want to read the email as to my response to the chair committee person. And that is, thank you for taking my call yesterday. I just want to confirm that you have made the decision not to allow me to present at the next committee meeting. I thought that as a chair of this committee, you would promote discussion and debate, but instead it feels like you are limiting our voice in this matter. As mentioned, we as TRH hosts feel underrepresented on this ad hoc TRH committee, which is very unequitable. As a group of TRH hosts, we feel in order to overcome any negative impacts of short-term rentals and ensure that that we contribute positively to the community, it's essential to implement thoughtful regulations, help educate the community, promote responsible hosting practices, and work together. Thank you for your consideration, Amy Stalter. And so I just want to make everyone aware that we as premier hosts feel it's very unequitable, the fact that we have 0 representation, it feels, on this committee, and decisions are being made around our livelihood. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention and make sure that that note has been recorded. Thank you.
Next is John Stalter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as my wife stated, we own 3 properties in Sawyer County. In the letter, I'm just going to read the letter that you guys all got a copy of it. I'm eager to gain a comprehensive understanding of the goals of this committee. The ongoing discussion about refining the committee's scope appears to be quite dynamic. Notably, initial issues shared by Matt during the first meeting did not encompass concerns related to septic and sewer systems, nor the impact on clean water. There's been no concrete indication of septic issues despite the present focus on this aspect. Matt routinely conducts various inspections, including water tests, safety checks annually, along with we have a septic system inspection every 3 years. If there are apprehensions about septic systems, it might be worth considering an annual inspection regimen to preempt failures. Yet I must point out there's been no substantial proof that TRHs are responsible for the other problems outlined by Matt on the list that he had on the first meeting. I don't discount the possibility that TRH guests might contribute to some of these issues, but there is no solid data to crucially ascertain the extent of any problems. It's worth noting that my neighbors who aren't TRHs have sometimes overloaded their properties and generated disturbances. It seems that these actions are tolerated, raising questions about fairness. This situation prompts doubts about the committee's genuine pursuit of sustainable solutions, particularly given the exclusion of TRH owners from the discussion. We possess insights that could be valuable for achieving the desired objectives, unless the true intent is to phase our businesses out. Ideally, the chairperson's role involves fostering a well-rounded dialogue that incorporates all perspectives to forge consensus. However, our requests to contribute to the agenda and provide input have been denied, leaving the impression that the committee is covertly pursuing stricter regulations on our industry. This inclination raises suspicions that some of us might be pushed out of business. Our TRHs are meticulously maintained. They create positive experiences for guests who in turn support local businesses. By operating our TRHs, we offer families an opportunity to enjoy the Hayward Lakes region, even if property ownership isn't feasible for them. The economic impact of TRHs hasn't been thoroughly discussed either, nor have potential ramifications on tourism and the housing market been addressed. Has the committee communicated with the Chamber of Commerce or the Hayward Lakes Tourism Association about the potential reduction in visitor numbers? It's perplexing that some of our rooming taxes are allocated to promote tourism, while simultaneously this committee measures that could decrease tourism. Furthermore, the potential consequences on the housing market due to excessive regulations merit careful contemplation. It's imperative to involve a broader range of stakeholders in this process, particularly those who will be directly affected by the outcome in order to devise a sustainable long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on time. Okay. Next is Leona Sedlak.
Thank you for allowing me to address the committee. My husband and I have retired to this area. We do have one short-term rental in Sawyer County. According to the Wisconsin Department of Tourism, tourism in Sawyer County brought in over $141 million in 2022. It provided 941 jobs, produced $9.8 million in local tax revenue. We live in the town of Linroot. It brought in $50,000 of revenue for cash-strapped small communities. Across the state, it decreased the average homeowner's property taxes by over $600. In fact, with the amount of tourism dollars that Sawyer County has, I anticipate that that much dollar would be much higher in Sawyer County. So any action that decreases the revenue of tourism would either mean a reduction in services, roads, fire, police protection, health services, or we pay higher taxes. Short-term rentals properties contribute significantly to our economy to benefit our community. My understanding is that the health department has been receiving complaints that seem to fall into the categories of overfishing, fireworks, parking, noise, and trespassing. The county has in place ordinances and methods to respond to each of these problems. It seems that the complaints simply need to be directed to the correct agency. The committee has stated concerns over septic systems being overtaxed by overcrowding in short-term rental cabins, but there's been no evidence presented that the septic systems are failing. As a business owner, I do not want to incur a $20,000 expense related to overwhelming my septic system, nor do I want to have the lost revenue while my property is out of service. Septic systems are highly regulated by the state and are sized according to the size of the house. If having more than 2 or 3 people per bedroom is a concern, homeowners, long-term rentals, vacation homes, and resorts will all run the same risk of overtaxing their septic systems as with short-term rentals, yet only STRs are being targeted for additional regulation. By the logic presented, large family gatherings over a long holiday weekend are a risk. Your child's sleepover birthday party with 12 children is a risk. If the concern is truly about making sure septic systems are not overtaxed, the county would be addressing all properties that have septic systems. I'm not against STR properties being regulated and held to a safe standard, but regulation does need to be fair, reasonable, and fairly applied. Sawyer County has promoted itself as a mecca for family vacations and athletic events. Think of all the Berkey events. STRs support the county in bringing in the tourism dollars that allow us to have lower taxes, more jobs, and a better quality of life. Thank you.
So that's all of the slips that we have for public comment. We have
We
one
do have a
hand
hand.
raised. We have a hand online.
Yes, I have my hand up.
Okay, state your name, please.
My name is Brittany Gerdal. I'm also going to read the letter that was submitted to the board or the committee. Wisconsin Administrative Code ATCP 7214-2B states every sleeping room shall be of sufficient size to afford at least 400 cubic feet of airspace for each occupant over 12 years of age and 200 cubic feet for each occupant 12 years and under. No greater number of sleeping occupants than the number established by application of these standards is permitted in any sleeping room. These are the current regulations for occupancy within the state of Wisconsin for short-term rentals and tourist rooming houses. This is what the state of Wisconsin considers to be a reasonable occupancy-based solution and regulation. And I would expect that as the agent of state, Matt McKay has a responsibility not only to fully vet and verify any complaints that a rental may be out of compliance, but also document such cases in writing and issue citations according to the same statute. When asked by this committee about the complaints he has received, not only was it clear there is no current process for vetting complaints, it was also clear that he has no written documentation to provide and only anecdotal stories. It is concerning to me and the host of Sawyer County that this municipality seeks to enforce baseless regulations that are more restrictive than what is currently in place. The only reason for this that makes sense is that this community hopes to cherry pick rentals and doesn't like and target them in order to shut them down. It also greatly concerns me that there are members of this committee and the county board that profit from a decision like this personally, as they are invested into resorts, which would be unaffected by this new regulation. If this committee decides to enforce a more restrictive interpretation of Chapter 72's rules today, we will argue in a court of law that those rules are not only unreasonable, but promote a spirit of elevating the property rights of our neighbors above ours. Under the Wisconsin right to rent laws, all rules concerning short-term rentals must be reasonable. In Jay's own words, this recommended solution is based on creative math. Is Sawyer County ready to defend creative math as their solution to restricting our property rights in courts? Thank you.
All right, so that's it. Is there anybody else online? Sure, you've got 3 minutes. Yep. No, no.
My name is Kevin Kroll. This microphone's here, terrible. My name is Kevin Kroll, and I have a summer home or a cabin on Lac-Courte Oreille. I've been coming up here since 1995 or so. First, we would stay with friends, then we stayed at Trails End Resort, and then we purchased a small condo, and then subsequently we found a relatively inexpensive home, and we bought it. So we've been up here for a long time is my point. And what I'm seeing here is money's king. We got to get more money, got to get more revenue. And I understand what a premier host is, and even the fact they have super premier hosts on the VRBO, et cetera. Just not sure what it is. On my block, 10% of the homes are short-term rentals. Now, I also, based on my own counting, I believe that about 10% of the homes on the Lac-Courte Oreille are short-term rentals, though I have no numbers, but that's my good guess. Let me make a few more comments here. When I moved up here, or when I purchased my home, I didn't plan to live next to Motel 6. I never consider 10%. My estimate is that, okay, is there a cap on the number of rentals that can be on a given body of water? I think that should be a consideration. Nowhere in all the documentation, I got the package from the Health and Human Services, and there's a whole bunch of documentation there on you should do this, you should do that, no noise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that is not addressed in there is the impact on the neighborhood. There's people coming and going up and down my street. I have no idea who they are. And they don't wave at me. I don't know who they are, whatever. So anyway, one thing I wanted to read was from a survey, COLA survey from 2020, I believe it is. And the responses are to a question number 43. Are there any issues on the lakes, your property, or in your neighborhood, it says, that bother you to affect your enjoyment? If so, please explain. And I'm going to read 2 bullets. And one of them says, as said above, we've been here for 66 years with long-term neighbors and friends. 3 years ago, a close neighbor had to sell. The new owners bought to use as a VRBO, although this summer they only used it personally. The owners treated as if they are just renters, which in sense they are, as they rent their weeks from the legal ownership entity they created. For the most part, the renters and the owners' renters respect the lake, but the neighborhood feeling isn't there. We think Sawyer County needs to be more focused on regulating VRBOs, allowed frequency of turnover, noise, etc. At this time, not years from now, after the lake character can be irrevocably changed. At this time and not years, okay. They could look to other locations. The island of Molokai comes to mind for us. They have worked hard to reserve the community in face of VRBO pressures.
Thank
The
you.
next one.
That's, your time is up, but thank you.
Okay. I have a picture here of the dumpster on my block if you would like to look at it.
Okay, someone else online?
Hello, this is Christina Green. I don't know how to raise my hand. May I speak?
Yes, please, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Christina Green. I'm also an attorney with Sweet and Mayor in Walworth County, Wisconsin, where we've also addressed short-term rentals. I would like to say that I understand and agree that some short-term rentals do need to have some regulations. But what I understood was that this committee was about looking at septic systems, and the people who I hear who are objecting or saying that something needs to happen are just blanket arguments against short-term rentals. I don't believe that this is what this committee is about. If you're talking about regulations about short-term rentals because the neighbors don't like them, then we need to be talking about regulations about short-term rentals. But as you pointed out in the beginning, there are state statutes that do protect the right to have short-term rentals. So if looking at septics is an end around that's trying to get around the state statute, I don't think that's a legal move. So I just wanted to share that, and I wanted to say that I have not heard one person who is complaining about short-term rentals be concerned about the septic. And I do agree with all of the people who said, if you're worried about the septic, it needs to apply to everyone, not just to short-term rentals. Also, I would like to point out that someone living full-time in their home, if they're not following the septic, has a much higher risk of having a septic failure than a short-term rental that has use in the summer months and occasional in the winter months up there. They're used probably less than 180 days out of the year, so their septic systems are probably at far less risk. And that is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have another person. Okay, yep. Come on up.
My name is Mary Stibbe. I live on 14941 Edina Lake Drive in Hayward. We do have a short-term rental next to us. We bought our home about back in 2015. We are on a private road. I did not expect that a Super 8 would be going up next to me. I believe the point that you're missing here is we've heard it repeated from the short-term rental folks that they are a business. These are commercial properties. We've seen rentals anywhere from 1 day to 7 days. When you're turning over a property every day, that's nothing more than a hotel. And as someone who has been coming up here since the 80s as a tourist, and then purchasing a home that we thought was going to be our retirement home, I'm upset that a commercial property was able to go in next to us without having any notification. It was built specifically for a vacation rental. I think that the zoning needs to be changed so that to reflect that these are commercial properties. I think that there should be a conditional use permit on any of these if there's problems. I'm not sure with the septic system how you're even going to monitor that. The home that is next to us has been advertised for sleeping 8. I've seen anything up to 13 in that home. When I voiced concern with the complaint to the owner, I was told, you have to remember that you now have neighbors. These are not neighbors. These are nothing but transient guests coming in and out of the property. And I voiced the same concerns of the gentleman on Coudray. Yep. Coudray. And I think that what you're doing is that eventually residents will not be able to own lake property because of all of these being bought up. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have another hand raised online, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry Sutton, 14225 Coudray Lake Drive. I've been here a number of years, and Hayward was founded on tourism. Much of it because of the lakes that we have. And for the explosion in the VRBO because of the COVID and everything, totally understand where people are coming from. However, with the lakes and the tourism, Hayward is a tourist destination. And the reason it's a tourist destination is because of the lakes. And we benefit from that as a county, town, and state. But the one thing that everybody has to realize is that you cannot impose your views and your beliefs on somebody else because you just don't like it. And that's what this sounds like. It sounds like people are just upset because they didn't want that next to them or anything like that. I have a couple of VRBOs right around me, and the managers and the people that own them take very good care of them and do a very good job. You're going to have people that you don't like. That sometimes happens, but majority of the time they do a good job. You know, this is not, it seems kind of like a kangaroo court going on, and that's just my view. Thank you.
Okay, so I believe we are now done with public comment. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention to this matter. We're going to move on now to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from the 7/27/23 meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes.
Okay.
I'd like to make the motion to amend the minutes to include the fact that I had abstained from the vote on the motion made by Mr. Neese, based on I did not hear the intent of the motion as I have a hearing impairment. Now that I am aware of the intent of the motion, I am requesting another vote with a show of hands.
The scope? Was that the motion on scope?
Pardon?
The motion on scope of the committee?
It was the only motion made toward the end of the meeting, yeah, to include the occupancy limits in the scope.
Looking back through the minutes, the only motion that was made was for the scope of the committee. There was no other motions made at that previous meeting. Today's agenda has other potential motions of discussion action for the sizing, but as per the minutes of last month, the only motion that was made was for motion by Mr. Neese, second by Ms. Russ, to approve the areas of the scope of the committee. I can reread the scope of the committee of that discussion, but that was the only motion that was made.
There wasn't a motion in the minutes. It indicates that there was a motion made by Mr. Neese.
That was that one.
Yes, and it was seconded by Laura Rusk. That's the motion I'm talking about, and I abstained from that vote.
And we can certainly add that into the minutes that there'd be an abstained vote from that. Unless someone wants to make a motion to remake that motion. I'm unfamiliar with how that process would work. Do you know Robert's rules of orders on something like that, Andy?
Yeah, it was passed on a voice vote without a negative vote according to the minutes. If Mr. Dale wants to note in these minutes that he's an objection or abstain, yeah, you can note it in these minutes, but that can't change the motion of the last meeting.
Right.
But Jay, you can amend the motion, including his abstention to that vote.
Correct, and the minutes will reflect that as these are draft minutes, so we do have a motion to amend as an abstained vote. But as Mr. Dale had indicated, he also would like to recall for that vote. That I'm not sure about.
Can't do that. I mean, you can't amend the motion from the last meeting. You
And
can
then I'll
have,
just
you can
change
have his
my-
abstention or.
I'll just change the motion to include my abstaining from the vote.
Yep.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes with that correction? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so we've got some business to talk about now, and this is with regards to discussion that we've had in the last few minutes on septic system sizing. And the code is clear as stated that the county is obliged to apply this. I think that the question and the reason why I want to have a vote on this of the committee is to say that this should be part of the licensing process. So applying the septic system sizing code is a requirement for your license for a TRH. And then Eric, would you like to explain that a little bit better than what I just did?
I think you clarified that. There's a section that's in the agenda items in chapter 72 of DATCP stating that if a septic is, or if a tourist rooming house is connected to a non-centralized system, meaning that it's not a wastewater treatment plant such as a city might have, and it actually has a private sewage system, AKA septic system, or a POUTS is another acronym, private on-site wastewater treatment system. It needs to abide by state code SPS, which is safety and professional services, chapters 382 and 383 for sizing. And that includes occupancy based on septic system sizing, which 99% of all septic systems sized in the county are residential sizing based on number of bedrooms.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
after Matt's comment, I'd like to make a motion to clarify a little bit that I would make a motion that the committee's recommendations to the county board on tourist rooming houses be based on state and county code, which we have to do. This includes specifications found in PSS 382 and 382 on private water treatment systems. That would be a motion that we do. We should be, whatever we recommend to the county board should be based on what the current law or codes are. Now, how we want to vary from that or what, that's a separate issue, but it needs to be based on what the regulations are. So that's my motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. And in discussion, Mr. Chairman, is that going to include also that we implement this code as for tourist rooming houses to properly apply for a license? That's in your motion as well, Mr. Neese?
No, it's not. I think that would be further down the road when we get ready to, whatever the recommendation is going to end up being.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that'd be proper later on, Jay, for actually when you're doing an ordinance or doing policy. Am I wrong? Or Okay, I'd be happy to include it if that's what you like, Tweed. Is that a friendly amendment or?
Yeah, well, that's what's listed here, is that when they apply for a license, they agree to be regulated in the septic size and bedroom. That's in the state statutes.
I would accept that amendment.
You want to clarify that at all, Jay, or is that,
Yeah,
does that catch
no.
it all?
And that's really the crux of it is, yeah, I mean, to be properly licensed and follow all applicable codes, including ATCP 72.10 parent 5, which has the private on-site wastewater treatment applications. And then we have a further agenda item to discuss what those applications may be, because that is where you can potentially change the type of sizing from residential to commercial.
I would accept that.
I have a question. Well, seems like we're getting a little ahead.
No.
99% of the homes, residences are residential, so they have to abide by that anyway. I think our agenda is to come up with an overall formula, if you will, recommendation. And I should think that that could be included later when we have a final formal recommendation. So I don't know why we would need to vote on that at this time
Well,
without further consideration.
the reason, Gary, that I thought it was necessary was because I personally want to keep the rails of this committee pretty narrow. And we need to be abiding by the codes that's out there. And having been involved in this before, it's very easy to get off to other things over here and adding things. But this, I feel the motion focuses it back where it needs to be.
And that's not to say that we wouldn't be able to, this isn't going to end our work here,
No.
right? This committee will continue to meet and develop additional ideas. This is just one step in that process. Yep. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I just have a question on the reference statute and chapters here. I thought I heard you say that they apply to short-term rentals, or do they apply to commercial, residential, or what do these citations specifically refer to as far as properties?
Yeah, so I guess there's two different ways to look at the statutes, or not necessarily two different ways. There's two different sections in 72 regarding, I guess, if you will, occupancy of that residence. And like Eric said, one is for those systems that are in our urban setting or on municipal systems, that those facilities would continue to be licensed using the cubic footage rule. Whereas if you had, say, out in the country on a private house system, a traditional septic system, you would then need to abide by the sizing requirements. Whatever we decide that those are down the road, it's just, we're basically, I think what Bill is looking for is, at this time, are we agreeing to then make sure we follow what is stated in statutes and practice those versus what has been done in the past?
Right, and this ATCP 72 is for hotels, motels, and tourist rooming houses. That is the applicable code. And Matt, as working through the health department, is an agent of the state for that specific ATCP code.
Okay, so it does apply to temporary.
Yeah, so it applied to hotels, motels, and tourist rooming houses. Now, the vast majority, I would say probably all of the new hotels and motels that have been implemented over the last 2-3 decades would have had the sizing codes required as per SPS 383 and designed for that commercial wastewater flow. Is that a correct and fair statement, Eric?
If originally built and designed with that in mind. And here we're dealing with residential structures that have changed to tourist rooming houses.
Okay, so my last question then would be, these are for hotels, motels, and temporary rooming houses, as you've stated. Is there a separate citation for personal residences?
The private residences are sized using also chapter 382 and 383 in Department of Safety and Professional Services, private on-site septic system chapter, a different state agency. So there's DATCAP and DSPS are two state agencies using each other's language to regulate septic systems. Is that, I can see confusion still.
Yeah, I guess I understand the motion, but I would like to know that I'm confused by the differences in the two agencies that administer that and what those specific technical differences might be before we go forward.
I can, or Jay, you want to?
You can start.
Okay. So I think if we go to chapter 72, ATCP 72, there's two paragraphs, two sections within that state code that allows for occupancy. One paragraph states it's going to be the cubic feet of sleeping rooms if you're on a wastewater treatment plant, a city sewer.
Okay.
Another separate paragraph limits occupancy based on DSPS's code for septic systems, private on-site wastewater treatment systems. So it's an if-then situation. So any tourist rooming houses that are located in the city of Hayward on their city sewer could apply cubic feet of area for adults or children for sleeping area or number of occupants. If you're in the town of Hayward and you have a private on-site wastewater treatment system, you have to refer to sizing not on cubic feet of airspace, rather DSPS, Department of Safety and Professional Services, septic system design formulas, whether it's residential or commercial sizing, depending on what the licensed plumber wants to utilize for septic system design.
And what are the salient variables in that formula?
That's a separate agenda item.
But in a nutshell, residential is 2 persons per bedroom, as stated in that code 383. There is an appendix that allows opportunity for design flow using commercial sizing for various wastewater generation, whether it's a church or a school or a retail store or a tourist rooming house or a motel. There's different numbers for that.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So at this point, I mean, the motion is really does the county want, or does this committee want to make a recommendation to the County Board of Supervisors as basically a policy implementation as to what we previously have done over the last 5-6 years? We've specifically looked at that one section of ATCP 72 and just applied the cubic room footage, and was basically recently discovered that, well, there's another section of that code for the sewer system sizing that should be applicable and should be at this point properly licensed. And really that's kind of what the current motion is for, is does this committee want to recommend or recognize ATP 72.10 parent 5 for that private sewage system disposal and utilizing the codes of SPS 382 and 383.
So then, Jay, essentially that we're going to follow the state statutes code.
May I? I have difficulty with the fact that, as was mentioned by some other folks, that we are targeting a segment of property owners based on whether or not they provide vacation rentals. That aspect of this proposal is in direct violation of the Wisconsin Constitution Declaration of Rights, Article 1, Section 1, regarding the equal application of law. Therefore, I cannot possibly get behind it.
Okay, would we like to have the motion read back from the clerk, please?
Give this a try. Motion was made by Mr. Neese that committee recommendations to the county board should be based on current state and county codes on record that apply to ATCP 72.10 parent 5 following state statutes, second by Mr. Schuman. Should anything be added to that?
Nope. If we're ready for a vote, I think I would like to see a show of hands. Okay, any more discussion on this? All in favor? Those opposed?
I have 7 in favor, 3 opposed. Is that correct?
I believe so. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 9 on our agenda. Now, this is going to help to clarify what we were just discussing. There's options based on the appendix to SPS 383 that require discussion for commercial sizing versus residential sizing. And this is basically the idea that you could have 3 occupants per bedroom if it's a commercial, if it's deemed to be a commercial endeavor. And there's paperwork that would need to accompany this, and possibly a inspection or a plumber certification. Would you like to speak to that?
So we talked about the 2 ways of designing septic systems, and one was the common residential design of 2 persons per bedroom. And I would guess that most of these tourist rooming houses, when constructed and a septic system was installed, it was designed by a licensed plumber from Wisconsin under residential sizing at 2 person per bedroom. In State Code SPS 383, there's an appendix that you can use commercial sizing to accommodate wastewater flow designs. Within that, there's a way where we can, with a licensed plumber taking out a county sanitary permit, that's $100 fee currently in our fee schedule, and also recording a document disclosing the change of design of the wastewater treatment system from residential to a commercial size. That's a way to accommodate up to 3 person per bedroom size from that existing residential size. I guess I'm open for questions, or if there's still confusion on that. It's whether or not the committee is interested in accepting this design flow change, or design for the same design flow changing from residential to non-residential systems.
Discussion on that?
Good. Oh, I guess my question, Eric, is with that permit you buy, is that going to get like increased inspections, or are you going to be required to pump it more often, or what? You buy this $100 permit, what does that get you? I know it'll get you another person per bedroom, right?
Potentially, yeah. So we have a.
What else comes with that?
Yep. So we have something existing for residential homes that are not TRHs, where let's say there's a 2-bedroom septic system and the family is growing and they want to make an addition and get a land use permit to add to the dwelling and make another additional bedroom or 2. There's a way that you can record a document where at Register of Deeds, where we're aware of the design flow not changing in total gallons per day. With an increase in bedrooms, we're going to change that design from bedroom design to occupancy design. So with that 2-bedroom, 4-person occupancy original sanitary permit, this document recorded at Register of Deeds would change the design flow from bedrooms to occupancy. We acknowledge the increase in number of bedrooms and allow only up to 4-person occupancy. So you could have 1 person in 1 bedroom and 2 people in another. So that's just a real estate type disclosure for residential purposes.
I have a question. Well, let's say I have a short-term rental and that I don't want to go to the commercial because I'd rather have 3 rather than 2. And so I originally it was my home and I'm running it. And so my septic was sized for 3-bedroom, let's say it's 1,000-gallon tank, whatever. Then if I would want to do that, then I would, you or somebody would have to look at increasing that is, well, I have to change my septic system. Maybe it's not big enough for 3. I'm just, I guess, question.
Yeah, we would be looking at the existing sanitary permit that you have on
Yeah.
record. And
Okay.
again, it's a change of design flow. So it was designed as residential flow, which in residential flow, you would commonly expect that there'd be more water usage that is per the tourist rooming house. And that's why that appendix of 383 exists within the Wisconsin State Code. They recognize that a tourist rooming house would use less gallons per day than as a residential setting. So that is where we have an avenue to change that design flow formula from residential to commercial. And kind of getting back to Mr. Schumann's question, that would be in that form of a county issued sanitary permit, not a state sanitary permit. It would be a county issued one where we would then change and document the change of that design flow from, again, residential to commercial. So it's still going to be based on what your current sewer system is. And if your current sewer system was sized for 3-bedroom as a residential setting, it would be allowed for 6 occupants. Changing it from residential to commercial would then be sized for 9 occupants.
And if my septic wasn't big enough, I'd have to make it bigger to get that permit.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, in the footnote of the exhibit that's on the screen, not footnote, but under the table, can you explain to me what the theory or basis is in that the flows per person for temporary rooming house are less than residential? It's still a person occupying a structure. I don't understand the significance of that differentiation.
I'm simply reading the code as it's written, and it says tourist rooming house, and it bases that per room. And again, different state agencies use different definitions. It doesn't state bedroom, it says room under there. So I applied that if it's 2 persons per bedroom residential sizing and it's 65 gallons per room, I did the equivalency factor in the table above to come up with those gallons. Hopefully that helps explain it. It's what was given in code. I'm not sure. It's been there for 20, 30 years probably. And I think some changes have occurred in the last 20, 30 years with tourist rooming houses. So
as an engineer, I question the validity of saying a person occupying as a guest of a rooming house generates less waste than a private.
I don't have research or reports that show that. I'm simply using what's in state code for generating formulas for design flow.
Understood. Thank you.
I wonder, Eric, if that doesn't include that a tourist rooming house isn't used 365 days a year.
I don't know.
Like somebody mentioned here, it's like 180 days or something. It's not occupied to that extent all year long.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's plays a role.
Yeah, it's certainly an option to abide by the DAT cap chapter 72, using all of the 382 and 383 code guide laws and rules that we need to abide by for licensing. I guess a similar situation would be for realtors. If a house had a 2-bedroom septic system, could they disclose that if an extra room was built, could they advertise or sell the property as a 3-bedroom? I guess if we're looking at non-tourist rooming house situations, I've seen this in the past where a 2-bedroom septic system exists and additions or modifications were made in the basements or rooms and then sold 20 years later as a 3 or 4-bedroom home. Is that something that can be done without disclosure of the septic system?
Well, that's what I was referring to before about equal application of law. Also, I just have a quick question. SPS 383.5 under management, would that not be a provision available to tourist rooming house? owners to install flow meters, monitor their flow and base their occupancy off of the recorded flow.
That certainly could be something that is done for increased pumping with for management of those systems. I was hoping for guidance from DSPS on this issue, and recent reply was wasn't really their job to provide guidance to counties on this topic. So each county appears to be on their own regarding this subject matter that is a statewide, nationwide, and global wide issue. So I think it's a topic of worthy of discussion, and it's not an easy topic to come up with, but I just wanted help with this and for Matt with licensing on how Sawyer County should best resolve this issue.
Just one more comment, I guess, just so my position is clear. Given the fact that I won't say a majority, but a number of these VRBOs, or temporary rooming houses, I guess is our term, were designed as residential systems, and for that use, I cannot support going greater than that as defined in this table. I understand that residences have holiday weekends with cousins and aunts and uncles, and may exceed their design occupancy, but these flow rates and design parameters have a built-in factor of safety. It says 150% to account for those peak flow times. So I believe if it was originally designed as a residence, it should stay with those requirements for occupancy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have we received an update from Rebecca on what the WCA, the Wisconsin Counties Association, is formulating, so that the whole state of Wisconsin is on the same page and that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here?
Yeah, and I have Rebecca online. We had some email conversation earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week. So she can certainly discuss or answer that question. I do have up on the screen here as well that appendix of 383, which does allow for that change in design flow, and it lists as a hotel, motel, or tourist rooming house per room, 65 gallons per day of wastewater. So going back to Mr. Hansen's comment, that's again, where that scientific research comes from is that, residential flow is more than this commercial flow. We're just using a section of the code that's currently there to make the charts and tables that we've provided.
Rebecca, are you there?
I am. Hello, everyone. As of right now, I don't have any updates on the model ordinance that WCA is working on. It's still a work in progress. We do still have litigation going on in another northern county that challenged the short-term rental ordinance from that county. So obviously we're closely monitoring that litigation. I can say that the subject of that lawsuit and that ordinance is, I think it looks very different than what it sounds like the county, that Sawyer County is looking at. So just a heads up on that. So unfortunately, I don't have any document or any sample or anything of that nature at this point in time that the county could look to, for some assistance. But the discussions are definitely ongoing, and WCA realizes the importance of this issue, as many people have commented on. And even though we do have some statutes on point and we have codes on point, it continues to be an issue.
Thank you.
And I can answer. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, let me know if you have any other questions on any other points that the committee has discussed.
Anybody? Okay. I have a question regarding Mr. Dale's comment about flow meters. Does that change in any way what we're discussing here as a potential vote? or motion?
I think it might be an opportunity. I'd have to look into that increased maintenance or inspection monitoring to see if gallons per day change. If in fact they are equal, greater, or lesser than the residential design, to allow for increased occupancy, I guess was what you were getting at, right? Yeah.
And what we heard from Chris last meeting was that what they're seeing is an increase in utilization from a residence to a TRH, correct?
Correct, with the holding tanks. With the holding tanks, we see that.
Yeah,
But-
you can't measure the flow
No.
in a
not on the
septic, but
septics, we can't, no.
Right, and I should note that, we had a couple different, not versions, but, as a non-holding tank septic system for, that commercial sizing. And that's kind of what we're looking at right now. There are, as for the holding tanks, we'd be looking at keeping that as residential, or at least that would be zoning and conservation department's recommendation. And that holding tanks would still be to the residential design flow, which is still more per number of bedroom than the commercial sizing for non-holding tanks.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I'll ask the committee if anybody would like to make a motion at this time.
Well, I guess to get it on the floor, I should ask the first question. Currently, if I wanted to go commercial with is it allowable under current, what we're doing in the county?
It's not something that we've done before. It's
Okay.
not as kind of
That's
current policy across any of the departments.
So to get on the floor, I would make a motion that we include in our discussions or to provide the opportunity, of course, the devil's always in the detail, but that commercial sizing be allowed on short-term rentals. That
For non-holding tanks.
without, not holding tanks, right? Conventional systems. So that would be the motion to get on the floor. I'm not saying I'll vote for that, but I think to get the discussion, we have to have a motion. So
More discussion on that?
we have to have a second.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Is there a second?
Yeah, I would
Second.
second it for
That could be
discussion.
included.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So in discussion then, Eric, by adding the option to go commercial sizing for tourist rooming houses, that's actually going to give them one more occupancy per bedroom allowed. Is that correct?
For not the formula on the table there for
Right.
non-holding tank
So
systems.
residential is still 2 per bedroom. By allowing this, they're allowed 3 per bedroom.
With proper permits and recording of documents at Register of Deeds, disclosing the change of design flow. And also possibly further discussion for coming up with increased maintenance to allow for increased occupancy also. That's a good point, Matt, to consider. I'd be glad to answer that once I know more about that possibility.
So if we're changing the septic to be a commercial septic, do we have to then change our zoning to where they have to apply for a CUP and the neighbors get notified? How is that going to change going forward?
Yeah, nothing within the SPS code or the ATCP code references a zone district change to commercial. It's just the sizing classification of it. So at this point, there'd be no recommendation, at least from the zoning and conservation department or myself, the zoning administrator, that we would look at doing zone district changes or conditional use permits.
Can I add to that, answer your question? So within that table, there are other things like camps or churches or daycare, things like that do occur in residential places. And you can design a septic system that way if you know going into it. we're dealing with primarily existing structures and changing the design and looking at that way. If someone were to build a TRH from a vacant property, it could be designed that way and permitted that way. It's I don't think any of them were ever done that way that I know of. They're all residentially designed. Does that help answer your question?
There's also a hand up by our corporate counsel.
Rebecca?
Yes, thank you. This is a good point for me to comment that we have to be very careful when we start talking about the zoning, underlying zoning designations, because we do have case law on point that has addressed the zoning designation of short-term rentals and whether a case coming directly out of Sawyer County, the question was whether if there is a restriction in a property's chain of title, i.e. no commercial use on a property, whether that prevented a short-term rental. And the court said no, because you look to use. And since a short-term rental is a residential use, a deed restriction against commercial use is not sufficient to prohibit that use. And that is a monumental case. And that's something that I think I've mentioned it to this group before, but it's certainly something that we always need to keep at the forefront when we're talking about different legal options. So those are very important questions, particularly when we start talking about notice to neighbors. And while a conditional use permit may appear to be the best regulatory mechanism for other issues presented by short-term rentals, that regulation through the zoning and conditional use permit process also has legal concerns. Now, that being said, one question that I had, what does the permit process or the amendment process look like if a owner wanted to have that or have the commercial application or the commercial flow standard applied to their system? Would that be an amendment to a permit? And if that's the case, would an option be to provide notice to neighbors when that type of amendment to an application is sought, and perhaps do some of the neighbor notifications through the septic permit process?
Yeah, so to answer that, as we've kind of brainstormed as how that would work, it'd be through a county issued sanitary permit. And in conjunction with that new county issued sanitary permit, there would be a document that would have to be signed and notarized and recorded on the deed. Now, that would be from an existing state sanitary permit that was already issued. And nowhere in code does a state sanitary permit or a county sanitary permit require any additional notification to adjacent property owners. Right. That county issued land use permit, though, would need to be, or the county issued sanitary permit would need to be signed by a licensed plumber to adequately document that the design flow would work per the commercial sizing that we're, I guess, looking at right now.
So when a owner wants to have that change in the flow design from residential to commercial, the process would be a sanitary permit from the county. Would one option be the county building into its ordinances some sort of notification for that particular type of sanitary permit?
And I guess what would be the end result of why additional notifications would need to be sent at that point? Because when someone's requesting to install a sewer system for a senior living home, or a sewer system for a church, or a sewer system for a campground, the sanitary permits would never have to be given additional notification to property owners.
Right. This would be a very unique carve out, if you would, a unique situation in the code. I was just trying to brainstorm in terms of how to accomplish notice to neighbors if that's one of the policy goals of the committee. Because you're right, Jay, there isn't a requirement under the state code that there be any notification to neighbors when there is the change in design flow, even though that change is permitted under the state codes.
May I? Thank you, Rebecca, for bringing up that 10-letter word litigation. I'm not against the recommendation that's on the floor necessarily. I just thought as a committee that we would have an overall recommendation that we would take to the board. And that's why I voted against the last motion. Simply not to go too fast. Phil, you said the details are the devil's in the details about this. And then Eric, you said that, and Matt, thank you. What about the flow meter situation? I think there's a lot more discussion and research to be done before we make any motion or any recommendation. So I'd just like to slow down. Thank you.
Go ahead, Martin.
But
Yeah,
to have that discussion, you have to have something on the floor. And I would
Yeah.
hope that we would provide a broad stroke for the detail to be handled that well, maybe Stacy is, but none of the rest of us are qualified to be making comments on sewer systems, so. I'm just teasing. Okay.
I'm not sure this is still within the discussion on the motion, but I don't understand the purpose of notification to change a design flow. There's no change in the end result of that process. You'll find out if a neighbor is for or against, but it has no bearing on the approval of the permit. However, Ms. Hessel brought up a point that I have too, is that if we are now going to allow the design flow, as the word was used, commercial, that in my mind opens a door for other commercial uses within a zoning district. So we've had public comment that said that these are businesses. Well, businesses are commercial. Therefore, I think we ought to make the distinction that what are these? And they were originally designed as residences. And for that reason, I will not be able to support the motion.
So I'm okay with postponing this vote if the committee feels that we need to have more discussion on it. I guess the question is, exactly what is that going to look like? Because I don't want to postpone it without a goal or a plan for our next meeting. And would that be to look into the flow meter idea, or is there anything else that we need to research before we can have this discussion again?
I guess my point with the motion was to get it on the floor. Are we even interested in going that route? That was the discussion we should be having. Are we just going to say, no, it's going to be residential, that's it, there'll be no other options for the folks, because we're currently not doing that. Do we want to allow that to go forward? And then I think if it is, then you can have discussions forever about whatever. But if there's no sense having a discussion if the committee is not interested in allowing commercial for that option to be used. And so that was the reason for the motion. I mean, are we interested in exploring that? If we are, fine. If we're not, fine too. Then it's over with. But then we're not wasting everybody's time on something that's not going to pass the committee.
I just think that we need to postpone it until we have further information. Matt brought up some good points. I think at this point, most of our conversation should be discussion only, like Mr. Nathan said. So it's not that I don't support it. It's just that I think that we're not ready to be voting on major issues that we haven't discussed thoroughly yet.
Cheryl, did you want to say something?
Doesn't, you had the blue lined up there with the, what was it? ESPS. Didn't it spell out when you're talking the commercial, Martin? Didn't it spell out 3 of them and the last one was tourist rooming houses? So that means if you were going to do a some other commercial business there, set up a print shop as an example, that wouldn't be under tourist rooming houses. And weren't there 3 that were on there?
Yeah, hotel, motel, and tourist
Yeah.
rooming house.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that and thank you. However, I think many of these properties are originally designed as residential, and that's where I'd like to keep, that's where my personal focus is.
So just to clarify that, on the top of that page, if you can scroll up there, of that appendix in the table, it states commercial facilities, and then it also says public facility wastewater flows. So it's an example. I'm not stating that it's zone commercial. That's just another way to design septic systems that are non-residential. So there's residential design, non-residential design, and it could say non-residential instead of commercial, to make that clarification.
Okay, and I seconded that motion because I was in the understanding that this is just going to allow tourist rooming house license holders to have the option to upgrade to commercial sizing, adding another occupant to each bedroom, which is kind of what they're asking for anyway. They don't want to be limited to a residential statute. Is that correct, Eric? So by approving this motion, we're just allowing an option to upgrade to commercial sizing for tourist rooming house.
Another option I don't think we've talked about is a residential property, a tourist rooming house property can hire a soil tester, hire a licensed plumber from Wisconsin, and design their septic system based on occupancy. This is to utilize existing components of a septic system. They certainly could add to the existing components or simply replace and size appropriately to whatever occupancy limits they wanted. And I think another agenda item is the timeline. And I don't believe this committee or the county board would implement in October 1, 2023. This is something where education and information will be handed out through years, yet to be determined, on this change and opportunity to become code compliant.
Okay, well, I just want to add my thoughts on this. I feel very similar to what Martin said about these, these are houses. For the most part, the ones that I know of are houses. They're residences. They were built as residences. They're in residential neighborhoods. It was designed to be a residence, and that's where we should stay, is my opinion. I also agree with some of the people who spoke earlier about the lakes are the reason why people come here, and the importance of saving our water, our surface water and our groundwater. And there's nothing more important to me than saving that. And, doing it the way it's designed makes sense to me, rather than trying to come up with a way to make something a square peg fit in a round hole. So based on that, any more discussion on this? Where do we stand with the motion?
Right.
You gotta have a second.
No, you have a
What-
motion and a second.
So, Madam Chairwoman, what's the reason for postponing it then? Are we waiting for WCA to chime in and see where they're at? We're waiting for more discussion. Eric's got more ideas.
Yeah, the other flow meter was the other aspect, and looking into flow meter for other design flows, which we've talked about a little bit, but we haven't gone down that process yet to see what that would look like. But I do know there are some avenues where you can install a flow meter and actually design based upon that flow over a specific amount of time. Where again, the code classifies that every room is to use 65 gallons per day per commercial sizing. For residential sizing, every room is to use 100 gallons per day. And then there is you use 150% of that design flow. But through water monitoring, and I don't know what the time process is or how that works. And that would be something that we would explore if there was other options available there.
So having said that, I'm not sure that it's a dependency. on what we're talking about right here, the commercial versus residential. It sounds like it's an additional step or additional option that we could apply at a later date. So having said that, we should,
withdraw my motion.
you are going to withdraw your motion?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we will look to put this on the next agenda for our next meeting. More discussion to come. Okay, moving on, our next item is future agenda items. Imagine that, we just have one.
We just got one.
Mm.
Is there a definition or anything else?
Well, the timeline thing I think is important as well. You know, we talked about how quickly you can go from having it be, you know, no speed limit to putting in a speed limit. And what we would have to do from the county standpoint, which I think is really, really up to you guys as far as that implementation road and what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to happen overnight. So whatever is decided is going to take some time, because we know that owners, operators of tourist rooming houses often are booking the following year. So if they came this summer, a lot of people are rebooking for the following summer. We have to give those owners, those operators that time to make those adjustments. If there is, just saying, if there is, and that's what's decided, any changes like that it's gonna be at least probably a 3-year change from, you know, first year, you know, creating, if there's an ordinance that needs to be changed, or just policies to inform those owners and operators that this is taking place. And then there's a time for kind of giving the second year, for example, time for kind of giving warnings and saying, if this happens again, that it could jeopardize, it could be a citation or jeopardize their license. So this is not something that's going to happen overnight, and it would take time if whatever is decided. So, and I mean, we're certainly open for ideas, but just we got to be cognizant of that, of whatever changes that are made, that it will take several years to probably see it all the way through.
You know, I'd also like to have more discussion on the topic of education. I know I keep bringing this up, but I really think that that's important. A lot of the problems that we are seeing, and even got mentioned in the comments today, is because people just don't know. The renters just don't know, you know, what the rules are for that lake or for that, you know, the ordinances that apply. So education is definitely something I want to have as a future agenda item as well. Stacy?
Could I request also that we get a monthly update from the WCA on what they're working on, and maybe that be our beginning of our meeting, so then we know and we're not duplicating efforts.
Rebecca, would you have access to that, or a channel for a WCA update?
Yeah, I can work on that. And if I hit any roadblocks, that'll be my update, but I'm sure I can get more information for everybody.
Rebecca, is Phil Neese, is it possible, even though that the model ordinance isn't ready, there's probably some boilerplate within that there probably isn't a lot of pushback on, and if you could supply us with some of those facts to make sure that maybe in one of those we're not crossing a line here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the interesting component of the model ordinance is that it originally wasn't anticipated to use this model of, or this mechanism of septic sizing as a method of regulation. And so that's what, you know, some of the delay is, because there is this new, when I say creative option, I don't mean illegal option. You know, some of the best methods of government efficiency are looking at a problem and saying, okay, we usually do it this way, but now maybe we can do it that way. And if that way works from a legal standpoint, it's an option for the government to consider. And so with this option relating to the septic systems, because it's different, it wasn't included in the model ordinance. However, it was well received on the WCA end. And so that's what, I don't want to say that's what the delays caused by, but obviously WCA wants to do this in the most thorough and best manner possible for all Wisconsin counties. And so because we have this new possibility, they want to take the time to look at it. And that's where the WCA work, touches on the Sawyer County work. And the other component from, the WCA's members hear a lot are consistent with what we're hearing throughout the county, and that is the underlying concerns that are raised by short-term rentals, tourist rooming houses, which are things like noise, parking, trespass, garbage removal, all of those, what I would call quality of life issues, in addition to, the important environmental issues that have been touched on. So from WCA's perspective, they're looking at this from a standpoint of how best to implement a regulatory system that drives at and addresses those items that need to be regulated without over-regulating. And that's a delicate balance. And that's given all of the different legal considerations, it's a delicate balance. And more importantly, from my perspective, the fact that short-term rentals and that concept of the Airbnb VRBO is such a new concept that we don't have laws in place that would that are easily applicable to that business mechanism or that business type. We obviously have the tourist rooming houses provisions in ATCP. We have the SPS provisions, but fitting those that new business model under those existing laws can be a challenge. And again, that's why it does take time to do this the right way in making sure that everything fits together. And I don't know if there's discussion regarding a statutory change to get some of this more clearly defined in the statutes, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that we see down the road. Just because if we, if the policymakers can't make something fit, given all of the circumstances, again, newer business model, existing statutes, then we may see a statutory change. But I don't know where that is at all. So,
Rebecca, Cheryl Treeland here. When you're talking with them, because they've got a lot broader spectrum than what we have sitting in this room here, even including all the VRB owners, is there a possibility that we could get some of the discussion? Because you said they never even addressed septic issues. Can we see some of the other things that they have been discussing for several months now, so we know at least where they're going or where their heads were at when they started on their project to have a model for the whole state?
I would have to talk to WCA about that. That's not something, again, because of client confidentiality, and I'm counsel for WCA, that I can share right now. And whether those materials that they have in front of them as they do their work, whether those can be shared, I would have to ask them. The other option is having a WCA representative, Dan Barr, who I work very closely with quite a bit. I had mentioned this committee to him, and we may consider having him at a meeting so he can, give that information freely from WCA. I'm happy to speak for WCA as their, as Patolis is their general counsel. But at the same time, I have to make sure that I don't breach any client confidences. So maybe that's something, Jay, I can talk with you about that in terms of connecting with Dan and having that at the next meeting may be helpful.
Okay, Rebecca, your 3 minutes are up. And
Yeah, thanks.
Good
We're starting to lose folks. That's understandable. We've been sitting here for a while. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. Before we adjourn, we need to set our next meeting date.
One comment too, please. Jay, thank you for having sent out the 2017 TRH ordinance that the county did not approve of because of recommendation from legal counsel at that time. I read through that. It's actually, there was a lot of really good things in there, including education. I might encourage us to just review that again. And there's some very good points. So thanks, Jay, for that, by the way.
Of course, I was chairman of that committee. That's the reason it's so good.
Okay, what do we have for our?
Yeah, so as the website indicates for the Tourist Rooming House Committee, it was previously motioned that we would look at the last Thursday of every month at 10 a.m. in this room. Meetings generally going 2 hours. That would put us at Thursday, September 28th.
Very good. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.